I will now call to order the January 12, 2022 Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Land Use Meeting. I will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and good morning, everyone. We are holding this meeting in person and virtually. If you've joined us via Zoom for this meeting and are interested in providing public comment, we will prompt you regarding how to do that when the time is right. The Zoom link and instruction to participate via Zoom are located at clackamas.us/meetings/bcc/landuse. Today we will consider Z0155-21-M, Z0156-21-CP, and Z0157-21-ZAP. Applications by Heavy Timber Innovations, LLC, on property approximately 19.4 acres in size and located at 25720 Southeast Eagle Creek Road. The application involves three separate requests: a comprehensive plan map amendment to change the land use plan designation of the subject property from rural R to rural industrial RI, a corresponding zone change of the subject property from rural residential farm forest 5-acre RFF5 district to rural industrial R1, and a partition of the subject property into two parcels. Public testimony will be taken this morning. As always, the public is welcome to sign up to testify. For those attending in person, please fill out a blue card and give it to the clerk, Shannon, and you will be called on to testify at the appropriate time. When you are called on, be sure to include your name and area where you live. I would like to remind all participants, including staff, all elected officials, and members of the public, that Robert's Rules of Order will be enforced during this meeting. We welcome your opinions and look forward to your polite participation. First, we will hear a presentation from Senior Planner Glenn Hamburg. He is in front of us now. I will next open the public hearing for public testimony, beginning with the applicant, who will have up to 15 minutes to present. Then, any public officials who wish to testify will have 3 minutes each. Next, representatives from recognized community planning organizations and agencies will have 3 minutes each. Finally, others wishing to testify will have 3 minutes each. The board will then deliberate and either render a decision today or set a time at a later date to make the decision. Assisting us today is our clerk, Shannon Bays, planner, Glenn Hamburg, and Assistant County Counsel, Nate Boderman. We will now begin the hearing with a legal statement by Nate Boderman, followed by the planning staff's presentation and their report and recommendation. Nate, you're up.
All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Now's the time set for the public hearing related to the previously identified comprehensive plan and zone change application along with the partition request. Just bear with me here for a moment as I read a couple statutorily required disclaimers that we're required to give. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing, which means a couple important things for those participating. First, all of the criteria that can be used in reaching a decision have been identified in the staff report. So testimonies, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the criteria identified in the staff report or other relevant criteria found in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulation that the person believes applies to this decision. So anyone testifying today is asked to please direct your testimony to a relevant approval criterion. Second, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and other parties an opportunity to respond may preclude appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Once final, these decisions may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. But this time I'll ask the Board of Commissioners to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest that you might have. All right, seeing none and hearing none over Zoom, if anyone wishes to challenge the impartiality of any commissioner, please clearly indicate your intention to do so in any written or oral testimony you provide. And that's all I have for the disclosures, and I'll turn it over to Glenn for the staff report.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Board. I'm Glenn Hamburg, Senior Planner. The application before us today is what was stated earlier and is shown on the first slide and in the staff report. I'd like to say at the outset, because it's helpful for clarification, that in this application, no new development is being proposed. In this application, there's only three things being considered: an amendment to the county's comprehensive plan map, a zone change, and a partition to result in two separate parcels. No buildings or land uses are being considered at this time. Slide, please. So today, I'll be as brief as I can. I'm going to give a summary of the application. The property is currently zoned RRFF5. That's a rural residential zone that also allows farming and forestry. The applicant wants to change the zoning of that property to rural industrial. They want to change what could be allowed on the property in the future. And then, as I mentioned, they want to divide it into two parcels. It's right now about 19.4 acres, and they hope to result in one 5-acre piece at the north of the property, which I'll show you on a map, and then another 14.4-acre property to the south. I'll give an overview of the property itself and the surrounding area. I'll talk briefly about the substantive approval criteria that staff consider in making its recommendation. And then finally, I'll share one, we'll call it a significant issue that was discussed at the Planning Commission level before outlining staff's recommendation, which is approval of the application. Slide, please. Here's the current comprehensive plan map of the county to be amended. Click. This is the subject property here for reference. Slide, please. Click. This is the property here. What you can see closer in the staff report is that it's located approximately 1.3 miles north of the city of Estacada on the eastern side of Highway 211/224. Slide. This is the current zoning map that implements the comprehensive plan map. Click. This is the subject property here. Click. And click. And outlined in blue is the subject property with an aerial image. Click, please. This is Highway 211 and 224. While the property abuts the highway, it does not have direct access from the highway. There's no driveway, for example, onto the property from the highway. Click. Rather, the property takes access from Southeast Eagle Creek Road, which runs parallel to the highway to the city of Estacada. Click. It also has frontage on Southeast Riverside Way. They sort of run parallel to each other. There's a site plan in the application that has more detail. Click, please. And here's a close-up of the subject property. You can see that there is an existing building on the property. Slide. The property being 19.4 acres in area. Despite its rural residential zoning, it has no dwelling unit on it today. There are no houses, and there's no information in the record to suggest that it's ever had a dwelling. Rather, there is this roughly 28,000 square foot building that's currently vacant, but the application materials suggest that the applicants ultimately hope to reuse this building. Although, again, no development or land use is being considered here. There are no geohazards on the property, meaning there are no landslide hazards. It's all relatively flat. It's not in a flood hazard area. There is an old log pond on the property. Click. Click once more. And that's dashed in green. And we'll talk about this quite a bit. It's an old log pond. Because the property used to be used for logging and plywood manufacturing related land uses that included a log pond. That log pond has since drained and has now grown in with trees. So it's kind of a square-shaped tree grove now. And then click, please. Conveniently, I would say, there are also some TriMet stops directly in front of the property. It's line number 30 that provides access between Clackamas Town Center and the city of Estacada. That could be helpful, for example, for employees commuting to the property. Slide, please. Just a couple of quick photos of the building, this 28,000 square foot building. Slide, please. Here's another view. Slide, please. And then the section of the subject property is outlined in blue. Please click. That property to the right is to the south. It's a tax lot that is currently zoned RI, Rural Industrial. That is the zoning that this application requests as well. Roughly a decade ago, the Board of County Commissioners approved an essentially identical request for this neighboring property to the south. It too used to be zoned rural residential, and the county approved a zone change to rural industrial and also a 2-lot partition. And you can see it's being used for sort of outdoor storage related land uses today. Slide, please. This is the subject property again, outlined in blue. Click. In relation to the Clackamas River to the west, click. And Kern Creek to the north. Slide, please. Here's the subject property closer up. Click. Just across Eagle Creek Road is the Eagle Creek Mobile Home Park. Manufactured home parks are not an outright permitted use in that property zone. It is what we call a non-conforming use. It's a legacy land use. Click, please. To the south is that RI zone property. Click. Also across the street is a piece of rural commercial property. Click. This is the Eagle Creek Saloon. I don't know how familiar you are with the area. It gives you a sense of what else is out there. Click. The property to the north is also zoned RRFF5. There has been a verification of a non-conforming use, meaning that they have a legacy land right on that property to a manufactured home park. And there has been a county approval that has not yet been implemented to expand that manufactured home park. But that again is an outside land use that is not normally allowed in the zone. Click. And then across the street is some more rural residential property. Slide, please. This is the applicant's submitted site plan. Click. And this is that 28,000 square foot building. Click. This is the wetland area. On this screen, the left is south, and you can see it sort of jumps over to the other side of the property. Click, please. And the applicant is suggesting that they ultimately hope to also put on 2 additional structures on the property with their land division. But again, we're not considering that here today. What would happen if this application is approved and the property is rezoned to rural industrial, that any future development of the property, construction of buildings, et cetera, would require a separate land use application for design review. And that separate land use application would have its own public notice to neighbors. So neighbors would have another opportunity to comment, for example, on the design of the physical building, access, circulation, landscaping, those types of things, depending on what the owners of the property ultimately hope to do with it. Click, please. This is the applicant's partition plan that's being considered here today, where they want to divide it into 2 pieces. Normally, partitions don't come before the board. Rather, these are things that are considered at the staff level. However, when somebody proposes a partition concurrent with applications that do become before the board, they get considered as a group. Click, please. Here's that building again. Click. And in blue to the south is the roughly 14.4 acre piece, and then to the red on the right at north is the suggested second property. Click, please. And these are the 2 buildings that, again, are not being considered here, but are just sort of envisioned, so you get a sense of what they ultimately hope to do. Now, I've been sort of oblique about what they ultimately hope to do because it's not relevant here, but the applicant has been really forthright in saying what they kind of want to use it for, and that is for cross-laminated timber-related industrial uses. They haven't, and the applicant, if they're on the line, might correct me, but I've understood that they're not proposing to manufacture cross-laminated timber directly. Rather, they might take cross-laminated timber that's manufactured nearby in Estacada and turn it into other things. Things like maybe stair supports or that sort of thing. So it might, if they ultimately end up using the property for this, piggyback on another sort of land use nearby. Click, please. So we don't approve map amendments and zone changes just by request, not just because somebody wants it, but there are criteria that have to be followed. Staff finds, and happy to go through all of them if you'd like, but broadly speaking, staff finds that the proposal can meet all of the relevant approval criteria. Some of them are pretty straightforward. I think the one substantive one that's worth discussing is a policy in the comprehensive plan of the county that says when you get to zone a property for rural industrial use. There are 3 avenues, and the applicant is showing that they meet one of those. Click, please. And that's the first one. You can potentially be zoned RI if you can show that there's an historical commitment to an industrial use on the property already. Click, please. And this application, at nearly 900 pages, is pretty detailed in showing that there is a historic commitment to an industrial use. Back since the 1950s, there's information in the record that shows, again, that it's been used for logging, plywood manufacturing. The historic log pond itself seems to indicate that. Click, please. We have some surveys, for example, in the record. Click. That show, it's too faint to see on this screen, but if you were to look close, it references there being some logging and plywood manufacturing on the survey itself. Click, please. Another old survey. Click. Click. That's the subject property in reference. Click, please. And then we have some dated aerial photos that also help to substantiate this historic commitment to industrial use. You can see what the property looked like in 1970. Click, please. Click, please. Here's another aerial photo of the property from 1976. Click, please. You can see the log pond in use and that still existent 28,000 square foot building. Click, please. 1989. Click, please. Click, please. Click, click. So we also detail in the staff report more about the land use history of the property, but staff are confident in that there is an historic commitment to an industrial use on the subject property, and that really is the main criterion to be considered here. And so staff finds that that main approval criterion is met. Click, please. So at the Planning Commission hearing back on November 22nd, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval subject to the 10 conditions that are listed in our report to the board this morning. The only substantive issue that they discussed, and I don't want to overplay it because it wasn't characterized as a concern, just a topic of interest, was this old log pond, which is technically speaking a wetland. And wetlands are sensitive resources, as you can imagine, so that has lots of considerations. There's a log pond, a former log pond on the property, as well as some ditches. Well, the applicant has done a wetland delineation study that has been provided to the state, who's reviewed it, and the state has confirmed that it's quote-unquote non-jurisdictional, meaning that the log pond and the wetland that's there today is not connected to some other sensitive water body that provides habitat for fish or for food. Same with the ditches. So broadly speaking, there's not much of a concern about the wetland. Nonetheless, the applicant proposes and staff recommends as conditions of approval a condition that would require a restricted development area on the partition plat, sort of putting this wetland area out of bounds. But they couldn't, for example, come in and necessarily put a building right in the middle of it. So staff recommends approval, having found that it meets all of the relevant approval criteria with the 10 conditions that are listed. Before the start of this hearing, I passed out the latest exhibit that's added to the record. It's exhibit number 11. It's an email that came in yesterday from a neighboring property owner to the north. This applicant has a request that there be consideration of a condition of this application's approval requiring the applicants to put up some sort of a fence or screening on their property in order to shield their own property to the north. Staff finds that that wouldn't necessarily relate to any of the approval criteria for what the applicant is looking for today, and that a fence or some sort of screening could be considered in any subsequent design review application. Again, that would have its own public notice that would go to the same property owner, and they could suggest that fence or screening at that stage. So staff respectfully wouldn't recommend that we have a condition of approval requiring screening or fencing, even if it might ultimately be a good idea, simply because it's not necessary to satisfy the approval criteria for this application. Slide, please. And that's just my thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Glenn, for your very good presentation. Really interesting. Commissioners, I'm opening it up now for comments. Commissioner Scholl, you have your light on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hamburg, for your briefing. I have a question about the restrictive development part on the log pond. The log pond is something that was bulldozed out back in the day, and I question the restriction to the property owner on changing that back to the way it was before. In other words, bulldozing it back in. It's not part of a creek or something, anything like that. So do we really want to keep that part in there to restrict them in the future from using that portion of their property?
That's a good question. I don't see any harm in it. Indeed, the applicant is suggesting that they want this restriction on the plat.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I don't know actually that the former log pond was bulldozed or even filled in. I understand that there is still a rectangular shaped depression. It's just that all the water has sort of sunken out of it. And then since the log pond has been drained, just natural rainwater and everything has sort of filled up a little bit in it to create a wetland environment. The applicant might ultimately hope to, for example, put a pedestrian path around it for employees to just enjoy a natural space. I feel like I've heard that mentioned.
Okay.
They seem in favor of having the plat restriction.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions for the presenter on this or comments from commissioners?
Yeah, Paul Savas here. I'll just say it looks pretty straightforward to me. I'm comfortable with the fact that the neighboring property is already industrial, rural industrial, and it's along a highway, so it seems to be an appropriate fit. So I'm pleased to be able to be here today to allow this to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. I will now open
Chair,
Commissioner Fisher.
Commissioner Schrader.
Schrader. It says Sonia on my button. That's okay. All right.
There you,
Sorry about that, Commissioner Schrader.
I think you know who I am. It's okay.
My button says otherwise.
I just want to make one quick comment. This is one of the most straightforward land use applications we've had in a very long time. So, good way to go, and we should pass them all. So, each one. Do you need separate motions for each one?
No, I think we'll consider it all in one motion, but I'm going to open up the public hearing first to see if there's anybody who wishes to testify, including the applicant. Commissioner Fisher, are you in the queue?
Yes, who do I come up as, Chair Smith?
Well, you know what? Now you're Sonia, but when Martha came in, she was Sonia.
Excellent.
So go ahead.
So-
We're going to get this worked out. Don't worry.
It's no worries at all. So I think I'm in agreement with Commissioner Savas and Commissioner Schrader. This is very straightforward. It makes a lot of sense. I am just curious, and I've been trying to Google along and research this because I haven't thought of this question before, but this is currently zoned rural residential and we're moving it to rural industrial. I know that there are some zones that are purely for farm use or high value farmland, agricultural. What is the difference between the rural residential and the higher zoning for agricultural use?
That's a
Is
good
there a
question.
difference on what that land can be used for?
Good question, Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you for the question. These are the types of questions land use planners really like to get. Zones like EFU, timber, ag, forest that I'm sure you've heard of are natural resource zones that have really high state mandated protections on them so that they are prioritized for farming and forestry uses. These rural residential lands, as well as rural industrial and rural commercial, are what we call exception lands. They have been approved for an exception from these otherwise pretty strict land uses at the state level. So they have been recognized as having, for example, an historic commitment to something other than farming or forestry, and so they qualify for an exception. At some point decades ago, the county received an exception from requiring this to be zoned exclusive farm use or for forestry because it had something. But a choice was made, for whatever reason, to zone it for residential use. And now today, the applicant's suggesting that it be used for a different type of exception lands, industrial uses. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did to a point. I'm just curious if the land itself is less high-value quality farmland because of that.
It might be. We use those terms in a regulatory standpoint, high value and low value, to characterize property that is zoned EFU based on its soil type, its slopes, and other factors. So we don't have a sort of characterization of the high value or low value nature of these soils. But despite being zoned for rural residential use, that zone also just happens to allow for farming uses and forestry uses as well. I believe that the property has been used, for example, for growing hay, but whether it's particularly high value soils for production, I don't have that information.
Okay, but when they did the original zoning of all of the land, there was, when land was zoned exclusive farm use, then those, we are assured, are the high value farmlands.
Yeah, there are lands that include both high value and low value soils, but nobody has taken an exception to the requirement, the default position that they be zoned for farming or forestry uses. Nobody's made the case that they ought to be zoned for something else. So the default is that EFU lands, timberlands, ag forest lands are sort of reserved unless somebody goes through a formal process so that they ought to be shown otherwise.
Okay, thank you so much, Glenn. I really
You're
appreciate that sort of deeper dive. And I'm good to go, interested to hear any public comments.
Is the applicant either in the room or online, and do they wish to testify? Do you know, Shannon?
I do see that Carlos Calava has raised their hand. Is that the owner? So yes, he is online.
Carlos, you may please state your name and your area of residence, and please go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Carlos Cayava. I'm a planner with 3J Consulting. And I have a short presentation for everyone here, and I live in Portland, Oregon. Is there a way to share my screen here?
No.
There is no way to share your screen, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, for further use, you could submit that ahead of time, and then our staff would be able to play that for you.
Okay, I did submit to the record that presentation. If you have it there, if not, that's fine. I can just read from.
Just a minute, let's let Glenn take a look at this.
Yeah, if it's the same presentation that was submitted to the Planning Commission, it's Exhibit 10 in the record.
Exhibit 10. Hang on a minute, Carlos. I don't have any papers here that say Exhibit 10, and I do not have my computer present.
That's okay.
We
I
have
can
900
bring it up.
pages here.
Just a minute, Carlos. I think Shannon's going to bring it up now that you told her what to look for. And we're just
Thank
going to
you.
wait a minute. Thank you.
Exhibit 10. Let me share my screen. Oops. My apologies for the delay. It's
That's okay.
747 pages, and so I am.
It's 147 pages.
747 pages.
740 pages, and we're trying to find one exhibit.
I found it. I just
Oh,
had
wow,
to-
you're good.
What page?
It just took me a minute.
She's going to bring it up, Mark.
Oh, okay.
Oops. Okay. Present. We're not going to present it that way. We're going to just present it this way. It is coming up slightly odd because it is a PDF and some of the documents are really large, but we are going to share the screen anyway.
How
so.
long is this exhibit? This one exhibit, did you say 10?
Yeah, it actually looks like it is less than 10 slides.
Carlos, it looks like it's the exact same presentation that Glenn Hamburg presented to us. Almost.
That works.
Yeah, except maybe for one map might be different, and then all that is a zoning map from the county.
Yeah, I mean, this, I can present just like this, if that's okay. I'll just let you know when the next slide is up.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Like I said, my name is Carlos Cayava. I'm a planner with 3J Consulting, representing Heavy Timber Innovations, LLC. And our presentation will give a brief overview of the site and our proposal. Next slide, please. So the site is located on Southeast Eagle Creek Road in Clackamas County. It's 19.03 acres with a zoning of RRFF5, or Rural Residential Farm Forest 5 acre. And it has a comprehensive plan designation of rural. So west of the site, across from Highway 224, are parcels that are also zoned RRFF5. East of the site, across from Southeast Eagle Creek Road, are rural commercial and more RRFF5 zone properties. And then south of the site is rural industrial, which is a zone that's being requested. And north is more of that RRFF5. Next slide, please. So the proposal consists of a request to partition the property into 2 lots, and then to concurrently request a change to the property's underlying zoning and comp plan designation. The applicant intends to reuse the existing building on site, and then to eventually develop 2 proposed shops, one on the site and where the existing building is, and the other on a second and separate parcel. To be clear, development of the site will require its own land use review process involving site design review. So this hearing and this proposal only concern the rezone and the partition. Next slide, please. So the approval criteria included applicable areas of Oregon statewide planning goals, the Clackamas County Zoning and Development Ordinance, and the Clackamas County Comprehensive Plan. A key criteria for designating areas rural industrial found within the comp plan is policy 4.LL.3.1, which requires that the area, or the property in this case, has a historical commitment to industrial uses. Next slide, please. So in support of this claim, the applicant provided within the narrative a summary of prior land use approvals and aerial photographs of the site to demonstrate its historical industrial use. So these included documents from the 1950s onward, showing the existence of a lumber mill operation on parcel 1 and a lumber storage structure in the approximate location of parcel 2. Next slide, please. Here on the left is a site plan from 1974, showing the site's main structure and storage locations. On the right is a photo of the site from recent history, showing what it currently looks like with that same storage area underneath the tree foliage in the background of the photo. Next slide, please. So House Bill 2681 in 2003, it sought to encourage the revitalization of old mill sites just like this one, eliminating barriers to redevelopment after the historic decline of the timber industry in Oregon. In 2002, a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change were approved for the property just south of this one, and the county commissioners unanimously approved that zone change, citing a clean case for historical commitment and arguing that the change would improve upon the lack of industrial properties in that area. Cut My Timber, which is one of the 2 companies that will be located here, is a mass timber digital fabrication company. They fabricate timber elements using CAD and CAM technologies, CNCs, and robotics. They're committed to pushing forward digital fabrication methods in the timber industry. Carpentry Plus Inc., which is the other company, is a design-build mass timber company. So they assemble the mass timber elements such as stairs and trusses. Mass timber is a more sustainable alternative to more carbon-intensive materials and building systems. So as Glenn said, the site was never used for residential that we know of or have record of. Even if the property were to remain zoned RFF5, it'd only be large enough under the density standards of that district to provide for 3 dwelling units. And many other properties in the vicinity can be used to meet that housing demands. So the applicant believes that the proposal will support a local and thriving lumber economy. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions for the applicant on this? Seeing none, I will now open a public hearing and receive public testimony on this item. Is there anybody who wishes to testify? I don't see anybody in the room. Shannon, do we have anybody on Zoom?
We have 3J Consulting and then Carlos Calava, and I believe that their applicants are who are online, the consultants, but no one is registered and no one is raising their hands.
Carlos, is that true that the other 3 people online are your consultants? Because I don't want to miss anybody. And what are their names?
Mercedes Sarah, she's also with 3J Consulting.
And?
That is it.
Oh, that's it, okay. I see nobody wishing to testify on this. I will now close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion at the top of page 3.
I move we approve Z0155-21-M, Z0156-21-CP, and Z0157-21-ZAP as recommended by staff and the county's planning commission.
Second?
Commissioner Scholl has moved for approval of the 3 zoning changes on the application, and Commissioner Savas has seconded those motions. Do we have any further discussion? I see none. Will you please call the poll?
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, the motion passes 5-0. Now that the application has been approved, I will direct staff to draft an order reflecting this decision and include it on the agenda for this board's adoption at a future business meeting. County Council, do you have anything else to add?
No, we will have that back to you here at, we'll come back to you. We'll work on getting that on the schedule. Yeah, shouldn't be too long.
Okay, great. Whenever you guys can get the documents ready, we'll consider it at a business meeting. Will that be on the consent agenda?
This one would be on the consent agenda,
Great,
correct?
thank you very much. Very interesting, very straightforward. We like that. If there's no further business before this board, I will now adjourn. Thank you.